Welcome to Help the Helpers. And we have a treat this morning. We're going to talk about first aid. First aid. And Banu is going to lead us in a discussion about it. And Banu, I am so happy to have you here this morning. And Banu is not new to many of you, but she has a very broad history and personal experience with Jean Genlin, which I always love to hear about. But I think, Katerina, you're going to read something about her. And we have a new member, uh, Delayt, who is from Turkey. And do I see her? I think she might have. Oh, there you are. You want to say hello?
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet you all.
And Dilek, also share that you're in Finland now. There might be some focusers nearby.
Ah,
Yeah.
good. Very good. Okay. It's all yours, Katerina.
Yes, so we are so grateful that you've come back. And Banu gave a beautiful Help for Helpers not too long ago. I will read this bio. Banu IBAOGLU VAUGHN, PhD, is a psychologist, focusing teacher, imago relationship therapist and trainer. Beginning in August 2026, she will be joining the Department of Psychology at the University of West Georgia as a lecturer. She has nearly 25 years of experience accompanying individuals, couples, and communities through change, loss, and renewal.
Can we just pause right there, Katerina? Would that be okay? I feel like that's a good summary.
Uh-huh.
I feel a bit embarrassed because it's a bit a longer bio, so I'd like to use the time to connect. But Katerina, you're doing such
What I
much.
could do is just pick out a few relevant phrases.
Okay.
Banu collaborates with Pat or Miriam at the Focusing Initiative to create psychological first aid in Turkey and psychosocial support in many parts of the world, including following the earthquake in Turkey. So thank you.
Thank you. I love hearing things from your voice too. Well, thank you all for being here. It's a bigger group than I thought it might be. I'm going to talk about a topic that is not, as I was saying, it doesn't sound so sexy at first, and it doesn't sound fun. But we're going to see if we can make it relevant and interesting and maybe even thought stimulating in the next 20 minutes or so, where I'm going to share some information with you. And yeah, and I just want to give you a heads up. There might be mention of distressing events, death, even maybe suicide, illness, violence. It's not going to be the theme, but I want you to take care of yourselves and make sure that you're okay. All right, we're good. So if everybody's okay with this, I'm going to continue, and I'd like to do something that I don't actually do very often. I'm going to go through a PowerPoint really quickly to give you a framework, then we're going to talk freely. And the reason I'm doing that is, well, let me go through the PowerPoint, then I'll explain, okay? So the theme today is being with the other when the ground, I forgot the name. I gave Katerina, but when the ground shifts or something like that. And the idea is, how can we be with people in crisis? And this doesn't necessarily mean a crisis that has a disaster. Some of you may have heard of psychological first aid, and it's usually used as a way to, I'm actually going to do this. It's kind of funny, but as a way to talk about disasters and big scale events, large scale events that World Health Organization has brought up. So whenever somebody talks about anything manualized like that, my eyes used to glaze over. And this was the case until I began using it. And I connected with Pat, and I had to use it through two earthquakes, and then I saw its larger relevance. So what are we talking about? Hey, the idea that crisis is part of our ordinary life, even though we'd like to push it away, and like to think, okay, we're going to sustain an ordinary life, but it happens to all of us at one point. And it doesn't have to be anything major. It could be sickness, it could be an accident, it could be an encounter with law enforcement, being a witness or a victim of a crime, traumatizing news, political crisis, health crises. These are part of our lives in many ways, as well as the large-scale disasters that we live through. And it's important to have a framework that I think helps us to know how to respond when the ground moves from our lives and from somebody else's life. So how do we accompany them? And it's different than what you do when somebody comes to you for a in session, or somebody comes to you for a focusing partnership, talking about something that's outside that happened last week or last year or 10 years ago. This is when it's happening in the moment. How do I intervene, and how can I be with a person who is going through something? And I can still see most of you. So, however, psychological first aid was actually developed for disasters mostly. But the idea was how to give care that wouldn't intrude. As you see, the care here sort of intrudes in the circles. I kept it this way, even though it was a mistake. And the idea is that how can we be with people where we don't harm them any further? How can we listen? How can we actually offer comfort? Also helping people address basic needs, food, water, information, and connecting people to their loved ones and services and their own resources and to information. And this actually came about because they found out other formats that tried to help people, quote unquote, weren't so helpful. Trying to make people talk, debrief after a crisis or an emergency ended up not helping or potentially harming. So they came up with some guidelines that would say, how can we be in a situation where that's going to be supportive? And it really becomes important because all of you probably have been in a situation where somebody was dealing with a crisis and you don't want to make it worse, or somebody's trying to deal with you and they try to help and it doesn't help. So this is a very simple framework that I find very, very helpful. And what it is not a professionals only framework. Anyone can offer it. By the way, today kind of much better. Anyone can offer it. They even teach it in some communities to high school students. So it's a community care. It's not a professional help. It is not counseling or a clinical intervention. It is not debriefing unless that's what they want to do. You are not analyzing, and there is no pressure. And so it seems kind of basic and obvious, right? And when you're in a crisis, it's good to know, again, why this might work and why it's a good idea. And I want you to think of it in comparison to physical first aid. What does physical first aid do? It stops something from getting worse. And if done well, it can prevent a crisis, but it's not medical treatment. So I believe everybody needs to know basic psychological first aid. And the reason it works is there is data to show that people do better over the long term if in the moment of crisis, they can feel safer, connected, and in touch with their agency, their capacity to respond. So I think of it in terms of focusing, understanding where they're in touch with the life forward process, because we freeze when something like that happens. So PFA actually helps you be with someone in a way that can help them just carry forward just a little bit where their process can continue. And it works what people do better when they have access to social, physical, and emotional support and regain a sense of control by being able to help themselves. And I'll talk about that a bit more later on with the stories. So this is the boring part. So, and the main points are prepare whenever something's happened, if it's possible. I mean, you can have a fire that happens, you know, next door to you, or something happens. If you can at least be prepared, know a little bit about the resources, or you're going somewhere. So if you're doing disaster work, that's a whole nother conversation. But learning as much as you can, looking, which is observing about safety, urgent basic needs, and then listening is the part that we really focus on. And a lot of places really pass through this and they say, you know what, just, you know, look, listen, link, blah, blah, blah. But the listening part can be the one that makes the biggest difference, especially over time. And we'll talk about that a little more. And the listening is very helpful to have some focusing, but it's a little bit different than what we do in focusing. And the idea is to connect with people, ask about needs and concerns, and then listen and help them feel connected to themselves, their resources, all this, and then link. So the 3 L's, we put the prepare or learn before, you make it 4 L's. PLLL, look, listen, link, which could be just something as simple as, hey, there's actually medical service over there. We can go and get help from them. Or here's the number of a community center that has these resources. So in moments of crises, these help us connect to our community and to our resources. So we're not thinking in terms of one-on-one, I'm being the helper. It's more like, how am I showing up in a way where I can support the community to carry forward and the person to carry forward in their community. And it doesn't look like helping a lot of times, especially if the situation is really overwhelming. And I'll talk a little bit about examples. And I say it's still focusing because we pause, we turn toward and observe, and I'd be happy to share these, by the way, if you need. We are with, we use brief reflections, and we trust the implying. Just like in focusing, we're being with, of course, we're giving information. You want to be informed, not just my wonderful presence is going to help someone, but more than that, trusting the implying, just staying with makes a big difference. And then link forward to next steps, information, people, and others. Well, if you can handle one more slide, can you handle one more? Give me a thumbs up if you can.
Sure.
Yes.
Okay. And the idea is here, we accompany and we don't lead. So the principles are still there that we have, but we don't also increase the intensity. So we know there's no intensity without safety, right? When we're staying and listening to someone, we use reflections, we use the presence as focusers know how, but we don't try to go for more intensity or for discharge or for, you know, really looking at what's happening. We just first stay with safety and connection and follow their process. And it's also important, if some information is needed, we give that. And something like focusing does happen. You can see the shift with safety and the right presence. It happens anyway, and it doesn't need to be prompted. Yeah. And we talked about this. We're here there as a community and a witness, not as external, just we go there and we just, ideally, even if you're gonna leave, you still stay with the community mindset because we are all community. Let's say you went to a disaster in another country, you're coming, you're still part of the community at the moment. And we are part of the larger world community. We belong to the picture in some way. And especially if you're a neighbor or this is your community, that's extra important. And what we say is connection is the intervention. And it's an interconnected process. Their carrying forward is woven into their communities, however you define that. And you keep that in mind. And And the other piece is, as focusers, holding ourselves become really important. And that safe presence we can offer in terms of unsafety. That's the self-care. And I'll talk about this part later, actually. I'm going to stop right now. Okay, I only have like one slide left and we'll talk about holding yourself. So I know this was a lot of front loading. Because of the time, I wanted to try and do it this way. So I want to ask, how is all this sitting with you so far? I'm wondering what's coming up in you when you hear all this. And I know it's different for everyone. I think Shashi, right? And then Lynn.
Oh, I don't know if I open my picture, people think I want to speak, but thank you. It sits very well. I can fully imagine myself being in the situation, and I think this is a really good guideline to be of help and being safe, and also being able to um, use minimal resources you have at that time and pulling people's strengths and the interconnectivity, um, and
Really?
not psychologizing, not da-di-da-di-da, but yeah, it's good. It makes sense.
I love it. Thank you. That makes me feel so good. Yeah, you got it and expressed it better than I could. Yeah, with the minimal resources you have in a situation where there's maybe nothing. How can I be so I can be of help and not do any harm? And how can I also hold myself, right? And it's beautiful. Thank you, Shashi. And Lynn, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's very helpful to me, and I'm thinking about our situation in New York, where we're preparing to help when ICE is stopping people and
Right.
perhaps taking them away. And we've done some training, or I wouldn't even call it training, some helpful comments to people about how to just be calm, be very present, be unobtrusive, say very little, but just get the person's information, telephone number, so you can find their family, and just that silent presence that says, "I'm with you, and we're gonna help here," without doing a lot, without making a big. What the problem is that people that want to help say, "Well, you can't do this," and blah blah blah, and then that makes everything worse.
Right.
So that idea of not leading with a lot of emotion is very helpful, and that focusing idea of holding space, which is what we know how to do.
We do, exactly. Yeah. And and this is innovating, right? For the situation, what works the most? How can I be of support? Thinking in terms of community, and just you're creating a resource for people and witnessing and saying, I'm here. And if need be, you can listen. And this framework, this little, very deceptively simple framework, helps so much. And you see it when you get in a situation. Thank you, Lynn. Anybody? I'll take a comment from one more person, then I want to share some stories. By the way, Jérôme is also part of the team on FII, and he's got experience with the approach, and he works with activists in France. And oh yeah, I want to say one of the things is I also teach Imago, but I'll take sometimes people, the listening part is the same. Well, not the same, but quite similar. And when I was working in the earthquake zone in Turkey, I met a lawyer there who was supporting with bringing resources. She was just literally handing out physical needs, but she's also a lawyer. And when we had arrest last year after protest, she said, I just went and listened to these kids that were arrested. And because I had an idea of PFA and I knew how to listen, then I could see how they shifted. Like, she's a lawyer, she's going, they're like, I can't get my medication, I'm not doing this, and everybody's freaking out, and she's just connecting with the person that has the need, hearing, of course, if she can connect the resources, she can, but more importantly, she got the idea, oh, I'm actually useful just listening. She said, I could see the shift, and she was trying to include PFA training in the Istanbul Bar Association for all the lawyers that are dealing with I don't know how that went now, but I'll check back in with her. So yeah, is there anyone who feels
Yes.
really moved to share? And then we'll have another time to share later on. Roxanne?
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
hi.
I would like to share, thanks so much for sharing, because it opened my eyes to disaster. Particularly because I'm based in Singapore, and my exposure to PFA is that we hardly talk about disaster because there isn't disaster in Singapore. And how we use PFA is in a form of like workplace issues, but when colleagues is in distress, how can we help?
When our colleagues are in distress, how can we help?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
As a non-professional.
Uh,
Or it could be how parents can respond to their kids, be it children or adolescents. So that's how the training goes about in general in Singapore. We do send, I have a friend who's an organizational psychologist. He used to work in the Ministry of Defense.
Okay.
And it's only in such circumstances when we send people from our country to support fellow Singaporeans when they are in disaster. Then that is maybe the true blue PFA that we are talking about here. But other than that, within Singapore itself, we use PFA in more of like a mental health support.
That's great too, yeah. So people know about it as a way to support colleagues and their kids. They have it as a skill. And I think that's brilliant. And that's how it should be in a way. Like, because you know how everybody knows basic first aid? Like, you know now that if something happens, a cut, you do soap and water. And the information gets updated. When I was a kid, they would just put hydrogen peroxide immediately. And now we know that destroys the tissue, right? Trying to help. And I think that's how it can be everywhere in the world, and it would help. Do you find it useful as learning like that in Singapore, Roxanne? Do you like PFA?
Yes, I find it useful. I teach it, though this is my first time hearing how it's linked to focusing. So to me, it's like, oh, it's very easy. I wonder whether is it too easy? People will start to question it. But most of the time, how it will draw people's attention is when people have questions and how do I apply it? And it's being taught, at least because I was given the material, it's taught in the context of mental health issues and suicide.
Let's see. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
like
it's
depression,
often
anxiety, grief.
okay. I want you to think about it as completely non-clinical for now. That makes a lot of sense. People might do that. And it sounds very easy, is what you said.
Yes. But I
And
like the lens that you are bringing.
Right, lens, perfect. So what happened is, when I first saw it, the first time I encountered it was actually, I think Pat was doing a PFA course. For some reason, I called Pat. I knew she was working with disasters, and an earthquake had happened in my hometown, but I wasn't living there. And I was like, how can I be of help? And I just quickly sort of went through her PFA things, and she said, you're a focuser, just listen. But also, I'm a therapist. I'm not only a focuser, I'm a therapist, and being a therapist is a double-edged sword because we can try to help too much. And she was, I didn't have time. She was like, just focus on listening. And I quickly went. And then when I went there as a volunteer, I saw the brilliance of the approach. You only see it on the ground because I would observe. And they say, I saw a mother with a somebody heard I was a psychologist, so dragged me in. They said, here's a woman with schizophrenia, and this is her mother, like after a disaster, living in a tent. And I sat and listened, and for the first 15 minutes, she told me about how the psychiatrist said she could cure her daughter. And she could not. Just listened, and I basically gave basic information. I was like, I don't think that's true, but how can we make your situation here better? Is there anything you need? And it turned out the daughter would get agitated and walk off. Because think
Oh.
about it, how vulnerable you get when you're in a disaster and you already have a serious mental health issue, chronic, and you're of a marginalized community. There were Roma people. So I knew they weren't going to get as much attention, even if people wanted it automatically. I mean, they're poor, they're Roma, the girl has schizophrenia, they're there, but you become so much more vulnerable. And all that I did was listen to her, connect. And she said, we need a tent up front so that when she wanders, we can see her. So I just went to I connected her to the people in charge. I knew where the desk was because before I went in, I first observed and I walked the whole area, figured out where the resources was. Then I went to the desk and I said, hey, they need a tent up front, using my psychologist status at the time, but saying they have a daughter with mental health issues. Do you have a tent? They're like, oh yeah, somebody left, move them. That was my job. I was done. And that was one thing that prevented further victimization and further distress. I certainly, I'm not going to cure her schizophrenia. And I can't do anything because I'm not even staying there. I'm not even officially official. Anyway, another woman I saw just chatted. She seemed like really alone. And I said, hey, how are you? Do you want to chat? And we chatted, and turns out her house was standing. She couldn't go. Long story short, she wasn't able to get her anxiety medication, connected her with the medical tent. And then I said, I'm going to check back in with you tomorrow. If I can't check back in, you don't promise. But went and checked back in and talked about her resources, connecting. She used to take walks. And of course, it was very distressing because her friends had died and the apartment next door. But we're like, how can we actually create some functionality? And do you want to take walks? Just the idea after the connection, not, and informing like it would probably help to routine, because you also have to know, like, one of the things that help people is to get a bit of their former routine. So I'm not going to send her to Pilates, but she was walking every day. Do you want to maybe walk again? And let's walk together. Whatever. And then went back the third day. She was able to get back into her house, and I'm done. I have no idea. So it can help with connecting people with resources, and you don't have to be a psychologist. And one of the things that hurt me the most when later on, by the way, fast forward a couple of years, we had this really, the earthquake in my hometown, which was pretty bad, was like nothing compared to what happened a few years ago. And a few years later in 2023, that was Armageddon. I was frozen, I'm watching. They had 2 7.5s, one after another. One of the cities has historically been destroyed 7 times with earthquakes. I'm frozen. And one of my colleagues from the PFA thing, a Turkish woman, called me and said, Banu, PFA. I said, what are you talking about? The whole, the world's on fire. No, what I said, it's the end of the world. What can we do? Like, what's PFA going to do? But luckily, that got me on, and that ended up taking us to a whole nother journey. And I found out that this approach helped people. I have many other stories of supporting just a child. There's certain things to watch out for, who is worried about her cat, after something, to really sitting with someone who, when they're telling you about how they took the dead bodies out of their sister out of the building. And or someone who 2 years later, who hadn't been seemingly impacted, saw me and forced me to have a cup of coffee with him and listen to him because he hadn't been listened to after the city was destroyed. That was the most touching one. So just that PFA lens allowed me to be really present with people, and focusing, of course, also helped in this. And it's much longer than we can get into here, but just that idea of, okay, here's what I know to be useful, and just listen, link, mostly like observe, listen, and link. And most recently, I have other examples too, but this is the one after. We'll talk a little bit and then we'll do some breakout groups. But I was giving a training, and one of my students we're in Istanbul, took a boat to enjoy the Bosphorus. And then she called me. She said, I saw somebody jump off the boat. I have no idea. I've never heard of that before. She's like, I think someone jumped. And then she came and she was frantic because she saw this woman pass, and then the woman disappeared, told the boat people, whatever, didn't know what happened to this person. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. She's a therapist. Her sister's a trauma therapist. She's highly trained, but she's freaking out. Like, it's an impact of something for her. So again, I'm like, okay, what do I do? Yafei, I'm just going to listen. And then link, because I could see as I listened, she wants to do something. And luckily, I knew of some resources. That was also luck. But I supported her in calling the Coast Guard because the regular police hadn't been as helpful. And I knew of the Coast Guard because I complained about a noisy boat before. And she called, so she did something, and eventually, did it fix it? No. I mean, it turned out, yeah, the woman had actually died and it was a suicide. But there was all this complexity. Again, still keeping to the same principles, knowing the thing that helps her the most is going to be being able to take some action, not one that I'm forcing her. So I didn't insist, oh, you got to call the Coast Guard because it's my agenda. I could see in her process, I want to do something. I don't know what happened. I don't know if they took the action they needed to. Because the boatmen, apparently it's very common, and they kind of ignored her because she didn't literally see the moment of the jump. And so that was triggering her with the trauma and, the not knowing. And Eric, I saw your hand. So hearing that and then linking her to a resource. So she got that, she got the calls. It was messy, not beautiful, but eventually she got the answers she needed. The process moved along and she's okay with it. So we can't undo what happened. And it's just so that the beginning is less messy, just like physical first aid. I know this is not, it's not, we don't like to use physical examples always, but in this case, I find it very useful. So because we have the structure to actually, I want to go along with our structure. We want to make time, sure you have some time for small groups and discussion. I'm going to pause here. But Eric, let's go with you first.
Well, I'm just really appreciating this because when we're with someone where there's a kind of global event, it could be personal or relational or earthquake, it's frightening to the practitioner. And out of our fear, then we try to help in a way that is not what's needed. And so what you're presenting, although in a way it's really simple, it's very integrative. And one could develop the elements that make this work for a lifetime. And as
yes,
was it Lucy? I can't remember, said from Singapore, that there's a
Roxanne.
mentoring. Okay, there's a mentoring aspect. And when my clients can't afford me anymore, I mentor them once a month. And this gives me a better model to just attend them.
Right.
Because I'm still, wanting to be my clinical self. And this points to a kind of presencing that we have in focusing that's a resource.
Uh-huh.
And when you spoke about how you saw the felt shift among those young people that you were working with who'd been arrested, I think.
The lawyer was telling me it's the second hand.
That's very inspiring. It's very inspiring to attend a group holding the emergence of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a nice job. That's not doing nothing. That
That's a
attending
lot.
like when's it going to come? When's it going to come?
Yeah, and she was talking about doing one-on-ones with them. In group 2, of course, we already know the listening part. and reflecting. It's just there are nuances that changes when it's a PFA in terms of how our lens is. But Eric, I think you got it, that it's not about trying to deepen or whatever. It's about holding space for the next thing. And we are actually thinking of, I want to do this, is my project, is doing a PFA course for focusers where we can get more into the details. So if you're interested, please email me. I want to put this in the next fall. It wouldn't be too hard, some of the things, and part of it would be to change how we, some of our impulses as helpers or companions, talk about stories and practice, and just let the lens sit in you. If you feel like it would be useful to your community or to you, feel free to email me, and I think I'll put my email down there later. Thank you so much,
And
Eric. Yeah.
one more tiny piece. The advocacy aspect is something that I can own, that I'm a little lazy or a little, I've always worked in my office and I wasn't trained as a social worker. This kind of moves into kind of social action.
Right, yeah.
And so you're bolstering that need for advocacy, and that, I need that.
Yeah, like knowing the resources and also knowing your limits. That's the next part, and we won't have time to get into that. Is you won't be able to do it all, and it's not going to be perfect, but it's good to know the resource, and it makes us feel more complete, like in the community, what might be happening. So again, thinking always in terms of connecting them to community and what to do. And the reason I want to tell you one bad example so you can keep it in your mind. There was a counselor who, after the earthquake, people had done amazing things and self-organized and been doing for 2 weeks. And then an employee, like a disaster worker, comes and tells her, oh, you're a survivor. Take this blanket and sit. We're here now. And trying to be helpful. You can probably all understand here why that's a bad idea. And she was still angry months later. She's like, how dare she came and told me to sit down? Because we think the idea is, oh, let's take the stress off of you. But if you know the basic PFA principles, if people have been trained, and this was a humanitarian worker, a lot of people just hear PFA in a very superficial way. And it's like, no, you don't give her a blanket. You say, what are you doing? Great job. What do you need? Do you want to sit down and, hand off, or do you want us to support you in what you're doing, which is what actually helps people. It prevents a lot of problems later on as well. And another one, I'm still sad about this, that because people didn't know, if there was more like psychologists or therapists and whatever went, and they kept saying, well, we'll only be able to be effective after everything settles down. We can't do therapy now, literally. They were like, since there are no offices, there's nothing, we can't do therapy, so psychologists can't do anything. And one of my friends, who's a really good therapist, was angry we were teaching PFA because she thought we needed to focus on people's fundamental needs. They're like starving, and luckily they weren't starving, but it was so cold, and there's very basic physical needs. If you do one without the other, you're screwed. I was so shocked she was so reactive. Because what happened is, as the basic needs were being provided, there was also harm being done, like minor. But because you get agitated, you're giving so much, and somebody comes and says, hey, I want the red jacket and not the blue one. And if you're not a disaster worker, if you don't have a PFA mindset, if you don't understand, you're going to get agitated. And with your attitude, you're not going to be able to hold the space. And for most people, there's a lot of dignity involved in being able to say, I'm choosing the color. Or even looking at, how do you do self-care? Am I frozen? No, okay. I slowed down in my screen. So there's a lot of like these nuances about how to be with people and how to know our reactions, like learning burnout. When do you need to step back? Why can you not do the thing and you're better off being in the background? And so I could see, like, one of the guys who was a survivor and a volunteer who did so much work was still hurt a year after the earthquake, even though there was a psychologist there who, because he was not mean, but he was harsh with another survivor. And it weighed on him. And he said, I wish there were people like you when we were doing this who would just listen. But she had a couple of therapists, but they were young. They didn't know PFA. Maybe they heard about it in their school. So it's an example of, I think, having this framework is a good thing for the world, especially in the days we're living through. So my intention in doing this wasn't to draw clients into a workshop, but I would like to do this. And if you're interested, please email me. Or you can email, FII or Jérôme even, or whoever you want. And I'm going to have an announcement out, because I really believe that with little shift in the lens, we can actually do some good and prevent further harm. Any other thoughts or questions? Actually, should we do the small groups now, Lynn? Or should we just stay in the big group?
Well, I think we could have a discussion.
Yeah.
At 10 after 9, we'll go into the breakout rooms.
Okay. I thought we were going to be done in 20 minutes. I always get confused about it.
No,
Okay.
we because of the time difference, we have about 15 minutes for a conversation, and
Okay.
then we can all just speak together, and then we have 20 minutes for breakout rooms, and then we'll come back together and just share what happened in our breakout rooms. Is my clock all right? Am I on schedule? Katerina, Christine.
Yeah.
Sounds right. And there was one more slide, but we'll see if that comes up. I'll just share it with you real quick. But Marvin, yes, we're listening. Let's just do a discussion about what's coming up. Okay. Marvin?
Thanks a lot, Banu. And first thing is, I have a very vague memory, but I remember in first aid, like at the very first step, they say remove from danger. The first thing to do, remove from danger, which can have two different articulations. Either we remove someone like from water, from the traffic, or we remove the danger away, like electricity. We switch off electricity.
Yeah.
So you've got two articulations, and then the second thing is shock. There is a condition, and if the person is hurt, broken arms, or bleeding, and then there's the system which is under shock.
Mm-hmm.
And it usually says
Exactly.
treat for shock, but it doesn't say how to treat for shock, except that putting the person in some kind of position and letting them breathe properly, things like that. Like doing the minimum, but at least you have a minimum.
Exactly.
I think it relates to what you're saying, because when I listen, I hear that sometimes we talk about anxiety, sometimes we talk about a threat or some kind of condition. But I can also refer to being fragile, someone feeling fragile from a situation because of shock or because of whatever it might be. And maybe my interrogation is the duration. How long the person needs to recover, because the person had no in a crisis had no antecedent of not necessarily a psychological condition, but went through an event that created a different condition inside. How long to we try to be by the side of a person, and maybe the last point I would say is about control. Holding the space can sometimes be necessary, like holding oneself to leave the space clear might also be necessary. It's very different, but it depends. Yeah.
So the last thing you're saying is, I heard a few things. I'm going to start with the last one. So holding a space is a part of this, but also holding yourself back so that there's empty space, like not filling up the space. Is that what you're saying, Marvin, the last one? Okay. It's sort of slowing down for me. But I also heard you say that you were thinking about physical first aid and the similarities, and there's the shock. And also, how long do you do this? And when to, what's the limit? And every situation is different. But one of the things that's important, again, there are nuances to this. The more we talk, the more nuances. But the general principle is you refer out when you have your own limitations, and it can be over many days. But when there's a resource that's needed, it's an intervention, of course, you just refer out to someone else. Our job is to just be there to move the person to the next step if there's something else that's needed. But an example, like there was a man who was just really angry and he was drinking and even talked about suicide. I was worried about him. And then I talked to him and he was really angry and I just listened. And of course, I'm not listening rigidly, because we're saying just listen and hold space. But for him, it was joking around with him and being like, dude, why are you avoiding us? Because I was in community, I've been living with him for a while. And he just vented to me about all the things that were making him angry, about the government, about the treatment he endured and whatever. I was like, yeah, it sucks. But also, here's a tent. You're sleeping in your car, that's not safe. We can give you a tent. And he was just being really angry about it. He was like, no, I'm not going to take it. But I just listened to him. Bitch, even sometimes validated that he'd gone to my hometown and he was mistreated. I'm like, yeah, people from my hometown suck sometimes, but just not trying to help, and just said, by the way, there's tents. And then the next day he went to a tent and slept in the tent, which was an improvement. About the rest of his problems, I can't do anything about. But so that's the thing, is referring to the next level, and you meet with the limits of also humanity. We like to have the fantasy that we can solve problems, and unfortunately, we can't. And thank you, Marvin. And this is part of the other piece. And by the way, moving to safety is also the first part of PFA. If after an earthquake and there's a building that's taken damage, you don't talk to someone in front of that building. Just like with this guy, he's not safe. We moved as much as possible. Moving to safety, being in safety is the first condition too. Lucy?
Hi, thank you. I'm just when you were speaking, I was hearing how kind of practically minded you are, how good you are at identifying the resources, and I'm kind of wondering whether in your thinking, or whether there are people thinking, especially as we go more into climate change and more of these events are happening and more will happen, whether there's sort of any ideas around of creating new organizations or charities that will gather together all these different resources, and there's like a hotline, and one can access, one can actually. Yeah.
So you're moved to share how important it is to create resources, and you're bringing that to our attention, or are you making an offer?
Yeah, and I'm not making an offer because I'm actually someone who's not well grounded in that way. And I recognize how in a situation where I would be looking around me wondering, my God, what are the resources available? And yeah, that I would love to know how to reach them, and who are they? And, yeah.
In a disaster situation, that's the worst part. Because whatever resources, like when I worked in Hatay, I'm telling you the worst thing. A month after the earthquake, it was like Armageddon, literally. I was like, oh, I'm at the end of the world, because even the police weren't really able to function properly, not the government. There wasn't any of the charities that functioned. They were damaged. The government couldn't be there because the local officials were dead or lost their families or lost their houses. It was just such a mess. But one of the things that people did was support each other. Again, this is a much longer conversation that I'd love to have. We could probably talk about 6 hours here. And what I appreciated about Pat and FII is she's worked in communities in different areas of the world, and her mindset is also about supporting the local ingenuity. And what we saw is that when the external charities came in, I'll be honest with you, there is a economy of humanitarian help. And often they weren't that effective as much as what the local people could do. And this includes mental health workers or anyone. So what we actually need are people in the community who have the basic skills and people who can actually work together. And so listening is a big skill. So I want to invite us to think of focusing as a bigger thing, more as like listening to the whole system, the group, the community, because we're going to need each other more and more. And you saw what happened in North Carolina, for example. I don't know if any of you track that. I mean, now things are happening, we don't even know about it, but there was a lot of community efforts. And sometimes when the government comes in, please don't arrest me, but they make things worse. And so part of it is understanding, and that's where the connecting the resources is also connecting to what they would like to do and very efficiently and to support each other, and then connect to the larger community, which is a humanitarian world is a very mixed bag, in my opinion. And because of the structures of how it's set up. So I'm a big believer in people connecting, but like having these interlinking things. And there's people who have thought about this longer and harder than I have. But also, Lucy, connecting and linking to resources is linking to their friends and family, to, again, your own resources of, do you take a walk? There's many things, so it doesn't necessarily have to be somebody from the outside coming in. But of course, for certain things, we're going to need, you know, the medication needs to be provided by this particular group. But the mindset and the work that Pat's doing is about the, how can we do community? That's why she does community psychosocial support. And after PFA, there's the PSS. How can we support people doing things, which I like. And Pauline raised her hand and Lynn raised her hand. Lynn, do you want to let Pauline go first?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Banu. Thank you. Hi, everyone. I remember when I was doing first aid, physical first aid. It was just part of something I was doing in a training. And I had this fear. Now that I know it, I'm going to attract loads of people with heart attacks and all of that, So I was afraid of the skill, And there's something about this that sort of has the same fear until I identified it, And then there's the other possibility, especially with therapists that believe that we create our own reality or bring things towards us. So while people like rescuing and like, emergency crisis situations, it's kind of knowing that actually go in with your eyes open, and that I think that there's a real resilience needed, and I really admire the work. But yeah, and I suppose the next bit of that is really, I think it was Lynn when you mentioned ISIS, it's like, oh Jesus, yeah, I'd forgotten that maybe that people would be lifted in front of you. You hear these stories, but you stay away from them. And again, it's that mindset of deliberate reality creating. I'm not saying that might save anyone for ISIS if they're headed that way, but again, that there are different possibilities or different mindsets now available, deliberate reality creating. So thanks, it's good hearing that. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm hearing you say, warn against something, against you giving me actually the material for what I'm going to discuss in the course. This is another important point. Disasters, like when you're pulled to a disaster of any sort or crisis, there's a heroism that you have to be very careful about.
Yes.
It can pull you towards it, but it's also going to burn you out. Yes. And potentially do harm. So that's actually one of the stages of a disaster they talk about, of a lot of people will be heroes and they'll want to go being heroes and they can do harm. And
to themselves.
And to the people they're trying to support.
Maybe, yeah.
And to themselves first.
Yeah.
But that's a longer conversation again.
Sure.
What I'm also hearing is when you learned first aid, did you get a lot more people asking you for help?
I'm not sure whether I did or I didn't, but again, that was the resistance. It's like, just having a skill, but it's also putting whatever I put attention to, I'm giving, rather than putting attention to nice, quite peaceful music and all of that, wanting to be part of that, that it is, I think you've addressed it, Banu, it's that if I feel that I should be doing this, you know, so it's working.
Right, and
Worked that out. Yeah.
I'd like to invite you as like everybody's supposed to know basic first aid. And
They're
this,
supposed to. Yeah,
huh?
that's what you said.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we all do actually. We know a little bit, right? We know what to do if somebody hits their head, is not touch them. That's even first aid, right? Or when you cut your arm, when you cut your hand or something. But so that's I'm not recommending necessarily everybody goes learn this so they go out there and help people. It's because this is going to come to you. So know what to do. And as I said, when my student just said, I saw a woman jump off the ship, or I was in the middle of an earthquake, and you know what I did? Istanbul had one after doing all that. And I noticed myself fading out. I just bounced. I said, I did a little bit of PFA. I did some work. And then I said, I'm overwhelmed. And I just left the city to come back if the worst thing happened, if I was needed. So there's a lot more about the self-care piece. Thank you for bringing that out. I don't think you attract more. I think you're able to be, with that lens, you can actually be more effective as time goes on. That's how I think about it. But what do I know?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you for sharing. And Lynn, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm thinking of a time on a plane where we got into a very rough territory, and I was very scared. And then I noticed that 2 seats back from me was a woman shaking and screaming and crying. And I went and I said, "Oh, I'm a therapist." And that gave me courage to feel like, well, I'm a therapist. So I went and knelt beside her and just lightly put my hands on her shoulders and just was soothing and listening and asking her, "Oh, where are you going?" And I couldn't speak her language, but I could understand a little bit of what she was saying. And I learned so much from that experience because she calmed down. She started telling me about her family, which I, of course, didn't understand all, but
That's great. What a good story.
that immediate, what I call making an us, that connection of just being there, that helped me as well as helping her. And it didn't need action so much as just, I'm here. And I was thinking that it is, of course, the linking is very important, but I think we have to be careful in the linking, not to say, "Oh, well, I'm just going to give you this, you know, and I'm out of here." To that make that contact that says we're here together, and
Right.
then other people can come in there.
Yeah, that's linking is for much later, but yes, it's a good point. It's not like this is what you need. Now I linked you, which is what PFA can turn into. But what it is exactly just having that calming presence, being with someone. It's like you're lending your nervous system.
Yeah.
For them to be as they need to, just being 2 humans together again. And for the situation. And no, that's a good story. And also the point you're making is it makes me feel better. So for me, when I went to Hatta, I never wanted to work in disaster work. I'm not interested. It sounds boring, but I felt called to it because I said I went because I couldn't not go. Like not going was worse for me. The same thing with what happened in Izmir. I'm not a humanitarian worker. You know, in that sense, like that's not my job, but it was very clearly something that I had the time, I had the resources, and I wanted to respond. And we first started actually with training people in PFA before me ever going there. And it was an invitation that took me there, which then became a 2-year journey. But so it's not that you have to be a disaster worker or like this professional PFAer. It's in your pocket when the need is there. And everybody's journey is going to be different. And it is a good idea to check for the hero impulse. That's one that we warn workers about quite a bit. because then there's disappointment, there's disillusionment, and you burn yourself out. Let me share the last slide, and then we can send you into, there's so much more I want to say, but I'm learning how to.
Invite you back.
Huh?
Well, we can have a part 2.
Yeah. Or yeah. Or like I said, do something just devoted to PFA. What am I doing? Okay. So the one thing, the huge part of this is self-care, which again, when I first heard of it, I thought, how American, like people are dying and you're going to think about self-care. Then when I was in the field, I'm like, oh my God, this is the most important part. The part of it having the skills is like sensing your own body while accompanying your own process. Notice your limits. You're going to have limits, and it's not a failure. Just ask for help when needed. The connection. Again, it's connecting. And some people need more than PFA. If there's more that's needed, then linking is part of the process. Resting, recovering, let your own process carry forward. So that is a crucial part of this. And again, there's more to share about that, but I just wanted you to know that. So it's not just being available for the other person, it's also taking care of ourselves so that our limits aren't overstretched. It seems like everybody is, I had an exercise, but I'm not feeling it right now. I had the idea of putting you in, actually doing something practical, but it doesn't feel like right. So I'm going to change that. We can send you maybe to groups of 3, if that's okay, Len.
Yeah.
And just to sort of talk about what's coming up for you. And you can think of a time in your life when having somebody just being present with you would have been helpful. Like I can think of 8. Just having somebody that had the PFA attitude. I counted this morning. And they're not disasters. None of them are disasters. But think of a time when it would have been helpful, and anything else that you want to talk about, if that's okay. And I can make the groups if I didn't ask Christine to do it earlier.
Christine will make the groups.
Okay, so she's doing that. Well, I didn't look at the chat.
I just wanted to make one more comment, because I'm thinking about this this hero impulse, and I was thinking that that people who know focusing know how to have the hero impulse and to hold that lightly, but to allow it and to allow the limitations and we're in it together. So when I was in the situation in the plane, I was panicked, feeling like, oh, I'm a therapist. That has this hero, oh, I'm, a therapist. That helped me, but I knew that it was the little one in me that needed to say, I'm a therapist. It's sort of like the little kid that says, I'm a hero. I can do this. And
Right. Okay. Yeah.
let that. We can honor that, but also have this adult that knows we're not heroes and we're just as scared as the other person. But I just had that recognition of the beneficial side.
Absolutely.
The hero impulse, and that it comes from this young place.
And I think it comes from a beautiful place, is when we see suffering, we want to connect, we want to do what we can. It's beautiful. So wanting to be the hero is not necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes it's used derogatorily, and maybe I did that too. But it's a differentiation. You're right. There is the wanting to connect and wanting to do something. The hero impulse becomes a problem when it's blind. It's not informed. You haven't learned enough. You don't know what to do. And you don't know how to be in that situation. You don't know your limits. Like one of my colleagues, the most useful, she'd been in crisis. She tells about how she told her friend, we're going there, don't let me leave the warehouse. because if I leave the warehouse, I'll crash. That was brilliant. She did that intuitively. And so the hero impulse can get us to do a lot of things, but if we don't balance it with not necessarily the hero, but it be a supporter, a colleague in a way to the people there, then they can become a problem. And also, Lynn, being a therapist loads you with the sense of responsibility. Maybe like I need to know something, but also you have the skill. So that's the idea with PFA is at least if I have a lens and if I just go through these steps, if I stick to this, I have something that I know is going to be useful. And it's that little shift in people that you see. What you did was even further. And not being able to do anything, by the way, what we talked about, the shock and being frozen and not being able to respond, is we know from, trauma-informed practice, is actually one of the worst experiences we can have. So this is about giving you something that you can do something with as you do the self-care. And Lucy, you want to say something, but I wanted to give room for groups. Why don't we do 10 minutes of groups and then we'll talk back in the end and maybe we can have a part 2 to this if need be. So if Christine is ready, let's do the groups in, just 10 minutes, see what's coming up for you, and then we'll talk. I'm not going to go into a group, but all right.
I just ignore it then.
Thank you.
I got so much out of this. Thank you very much, Banu.
You're welcome.
Go.
Hi, welcome back.
Thank you.
All right. I just thought of a couple of things I want to add before we leave today, but I first want to hear from the group. Anyone who'd like to share?
I wanted to say that the person who is helping is also part of the trauma, like people who are in the disaster themselves. How do you pull yourself besides the hero aspect of it? I mean, that really pulls a lot on your strength to be mindful of going in that direction because you yourself in that trenches.
Yes. All I'm going to say is yes. We
How
don't
do you-
have time to get into it, but that's part of the bigger picture. And that can be a longer conversation. That's one of the reasons why I want to have something that's more in depth. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Shashi. Yeah. And Lucy?
Yeah, I was just kind of going to bring back what I was going to say before, which was inspired by the whole thing really, but also what you shared, Lynn, that this kind of heroic impulse feels, I was just thinking about how in moments of crisis, internal resources can become available to us that we're not often cut off from.
Yes.
And you hear stories of mothers who manage to kind of lift up cars that their children have got stuck under, and sort of people who are able to do extraordinary things.
Yes.
But I'm thinking, I realize the problem that you're trying to alert us to, Banu, is that when this isn't a momentary crisis, but it's a long-term situation, you will know, because you're not there for an hour, for a day. It's an ongoing thing, and you can't ongoingly act from that extraordinary, unusual level of
yes.
Yeah, something that just comes through you almost.
Exactly. So that impulse to support is good, and a hero impulse needs to turn into an impulse to accompany and to know your limitations in time. And that happens with knowledge, with experience, and with support that you're also getting. Like I would always have friends to call, ways to take care of myself. And that's why usually people who go in trying to help the hero, when you see you can't help, and when you see these people who are victims also have their own process and they listen to all the time, or the situation is unhelpable, you can actually turn angry. It's a very well-known thing, or condescending. and end up not being helpful to the people you're with because you're overwhelmed. So that's why that support is really important, and information and knowledge really helps. And I think this framework, this lens is one of the things that helps. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, exactly, Lucy. Anyone else would like to share? What was it like sharing in group? Or just even being here? Dana?
Hello, I'm Dana in Cleveland,
Dana.
Ohio, and I came here because I've been kind of away from focusing workshops for a while, and I thought this could be a nice way to enter this kind of smooth space, and I'm really grateful that what came up with my partner in the group breakout is, like you said, knowing your limitations and being okay with what happens. That's one thing that came. I remember when I witnessed something upsetting, and I went to a friend, and she had limitations. She was cooking something, and she said, "Is it okay for you to sit until I'm finished, 10 minutes? And do you want some food?" And I said, "Okay." And somehow her limit gave me my resource came up.
Yeah.
And so it's a good reminder about, like, a container can be in different sizes, and yeah.
And that even that limit can be calming in a way of, okay, the whole world's not on fire. Like there's somebody cooking and I can just be with, and helps my nervous system. Exactly. That's how I heard it. I don't know if I got it, Donna.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, thank you.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. Anything else?
Maybe one thing is knowing what's happening. Like when I feel lost, it took me quite a while to understand this. I'm lost, and being okay with being lost, and not trying to do something out of it, but noticing it already is quite a challenge. But when you notice it, it's just like, whoa, oh, that's okay. As if it's a way of knowing self, knowing what's happening inside.
Yeah.
And since this morning, are you okay?
We're okay. I think you had a dog coming out, but yeah. So just even noticing and being able to name, yeah, I'm lost, and just holding that with kindness. Exactly. And what also helps us is being in community. What do we do? Like we're actually constantly trying to do PFA in a way, right? Something stressful happens, you talk to your neighbors, your friends, what are you doing? Really crazy stuff's happening in Turkey right now. And it's amazing. I think in another country, people would have we're still maintaining, granted, everybody's a lot more stressed out. I know things are also happening in the US, but I think I always wonder how people maintain. And one of the things is, I think the street cats we have, the love people have towards animals is very supportive. Another one is people always talk to each other. You get into a cab, I mean, if you talk about anything, or the grocery store, everybody's complaining about the prices, something that's happening. We're always trying to process with each other and connect, right? And that's what helps us survive. And sometimes we can get really worked up, but I think even social media, everybody says it's very double-edged, but we're trying to connect, we're trying to process, we're trying to make sense. And this is a way to sort of understand. And I want to tell you one thing before we leave, and then if we have time for another comment, we can take it. And I'll stay here for a little bit longer after it's done. But if you're listening to someone going through a crisis, especially if it's a disaster, because anything that happens, you can think in terms of, you have a process, you're going ongoing, interconnected life processes going forward, and something just stops it. And if somebody pauses, turn towards you and listens, and listening isn't just with words, even with presence is a listening. eventually, how I know something's working is eventually people will start to talk about the moment when everything shattered. And they know what they need, and they'll do it if given enough time. I've had people taking me from the grocery store, like when I'm shopping, being like, hey, do you have 15 minutes? Let's give you coffee. And then they would talk about this horrific story, but knowing, not being like, what do I do? Okay, this is horrible. I don't know I would have survived this, but I'm just going to sit here and listen and say, wow, you know, and then see if there's a need for any kind of linking. But most of the time, there's nothing I can do. So for me, it's helpful to know I might hear something horrific. And if they're talking about moment zero, if I don't have the resources, of course, I have to limit myself. But just saying, okay, now this story I'm hearing, and if they're talking about the moment zero, that's them getting a little bit better. And then I'm going to, of course, take care of myself in other ways. Then I go and dump my experience on someone else, right? I'm like, okay, listen to me. Here's what, if the other person can hear it, here's what happened, and here's what I heard. And here's how I'm living with this. So it's interconnected always. I'm supporting someone else is supporting me. And just that feeling, it's magical. Like if you really are with people, they're going to talk about whatever it is they need to talk about without you having to force people to deepen or anything, which I'm going to encourage you not to try to deepen anyone. Just really, because it's already, things are so intense when you're not in a therapeutic or consensual focusing kind of process. And it's amazing. Just, you know, Kyle Rogers figured this out and others, but just being with makes a lot of the work. And yeah, so I'm also thinking about what will be helpful. And there's a lot more to learn about, you know, trauma reactions, this and that, but they're not that important. I mean, there's some basic stuff we need to know, but the crucial part of it is taking care of ourselves and being with. Don't get me wrong, of course, if something happens and you're going in from the outside, there's a lot to learn, but it's not as much as you think in order to be of some help. Any last comments?
So we'll have a part 3 sometime with you. This is the second time you've been here. Yeah.
My schedule's changing, but I'd be happy to come back anytime, and I will to the focusing listserv. I think, you know, I got more clear about what I want to do. I'm going to send out an invitation for a training, like a training or a conversation for a few hours. Eric?
Well, I just want to say that your presence with us is very pleasing, and it's like you've joined us too. And I have a sense of longing, which is a bottom up. It's a bottom up thing, and it feels like a bit of a cure for the heroism, because when it's bottom up, we get the data that we need. So this is way more than I expected. And last week, Lynn said something about how we get stretched. And the way I heard that was our heart gets stretched. And that's almost about wisdom. So I almost feel like you're inviting us to wisdom.
Oh, yeah. I'll take
It's
that.
wisdom that does this. Now, we have all sorts of other motivations and skill building, but there's something that we already have, and you're pointing to it. So anyway, this has just been lovely. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm taking that in. I'm glad I impacted you in that way. And yeah, inviting to wisdom. We all have it. Exactly. Just noticing. All right. This is the end of our time, I think, and we need to close our moment here. And I'll be here for another 10 minutes or so if anybody wants to hang around. And otherwise, I'll see you in the future. I'm sure our paths will cross again. And may the force be with you with all your endeavors. And let's actually take a picture. I kind of feel like now the hearts are coming. Wait. I want to see if I can remember how to take a picture. If not, Christine. 1, 2, 3. Of course, I couldn't. Damn it. I can't do it. Christine, do you know how? I always forget the buttons.
to take a screenshot?
Okay, wait, I did it. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you so much and be well.